All right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My Geometry Essential students, you guys should be solving one-step equations and two-step equations this week. So let's take a look at one-step equations. All right, one-step equations mean you only need one step to solve the answer, okay? So when they use these variables, these letters, right, you're trying to solve for what number would fit perfectly to be that number, okay? So some number plus 3 equals a negative 8. That's what that says right there. Let me cover these numbers up real quick. All right, here's a piece of paper. X plus 3 equals a negative 8. So some number, you add 3 to it, and it equals negative 8. What was that number? Okay, so you could try to think about it. You could try to do some things in your head, but I'm going to show you. Don't even worry about that. Just do these steps, okay? So do the opposite. So what I mean by the opposite is if you see plus 3, okay, if you read it out loud, some number x plus 3 equals 8, what's the opposite of adding 3? Well, it's subtracting 3. So by doing the opposite, you will get your answer, okay? So I'm going to subtract 3. If I subtract 3 from this side, it's going to just disappear because you have an adding 3 with a minus 3. They're opposites, so they go away. However, with math, we got to keep this balanced so we can figure out our answer. So a minus 8 with a minus 3. We have minus 8, and then we're taking away 3 more. You should be at minus 11. Okay? So if you wanted to make sure you were right, okay, what you could do is plug this number back into here to see if you were right the whole time, okay? So instead of saying x, what if we said negative 11? And then we added 3 to it to get a negative 8. Negative 11 plus 3 equals negative 8. Remember the rules we talked about last week, which was if you have a positive negative that you're adding, you actually subtract them and keep the sign of the bigger number. So in this case, we have a negative 11 and positive 3 that we're adding. They're different signs, negative and positive. So if I subtract them, 11 minus 3, well, that equals 8. Okay, 11 take away 3 is 8. 11 is much bigger than 3 if you just think about the number itself. Okay, just that number 11 than the number 3. However, 11 being the bigger number, 11 is the negative number, right? The positive one, so it's a negative 8 as an answer, which goes back to what we had. Perfect, okay? The same thing applies for the subtracting. Let's say we have something like c minus 4 equals negative 5. Once again, you could think about it, think about it, think about it, think about it. Stop thinking about it and just do this process. I see subtracting, I want to do the opposite, which is to add. Okay. So when I add the 4 to both sides, on the left side it goes away because you have the minus 4, but you're adding 4, so they just kind of cancel out. Okay, it becomes 0. The right side, however, we have kind of a similar situation as we had here, where we have a minus 5 with a plus 4. Okay, that result's going to be a negative 1. Right, minus 5, but you're adding 4. One way to think about this, if you struggle with this, is think about you're at negative 5 on the number line, but you're going to go write positive 4. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, 1, 2, 3, and end up right there. So if I was on a number line, that would be my answer, negative 1. Okay, so same thing as before. If I was to plug this in to my original question, negative 1 minus 4, does that equal negative 5? Well, remember the trick I showed you before, which is to make every subtraction problem into an addition problem. And how do you do that? You keep this one, you change this to subtraction, you change the sign of that number, and what I got here is, -1 plus -4, which equals a -5, okay? Same signs, you add them and keep the sign. Negative and a negative add to a bigger negative. -1 plus -4 is a -5, okay? So once again, this letter's got to be -1 to make that true, right? Because we're saying that they're equal. All right, so we're going to ditch this paper. We got 2 more examples to try out. We got example 3, which is 8 times something we're going to call x, and that equals -24. So to solve this one, we're going to divide both sides by 8. Okay, why are we dividing by 8? Because if you see this kind of problem set up, this says 8x, which means 8 times x. 8 times some number equals a -24. Okay. When you divide 8 to something that was being multiplied by 8, what you really have is 8 divided by 8. And 8 divided by 8, like anything divided by itself, just equals 1. So what you have here is just 1x. And 1x is just x, okay? So we now have to do -24 divided by 8. And when you divide -24 by 8, it's just like a +24 divided by 8, which equals 3. But the difference is, because one was negative, right? One was negative, one was positive, the rules like multiplying are exactly the same as the rules of dividing when you have positives and negatives. 1 and 1, it's going to be a negative. Okay, it doesn't matter you're dividing by a +8, doesn't matter which one's bigger or smaller, doesn't matter. 1 negative, 1 positive, multiplying or dividing, you're going to have a negative, okay? So you have 1 negative here, you've got to have a negative there. So thinking about our original problem, okay, if we were to plug this back in, right, instead of saying 8x, right, 8 times x, we should say 8 times -3. Does 8 times -3 equal a -24? You betcha, right? 8 times 3 is 24. One's positive, one's negative. Therefore, it's a -24. Okay? All right. And this last problem is when you have a fraction. Okay? A fraction means division. And as you've seen before, this inventory, right? We're adding, we do subtraction to solve. We're doing subtraction, you got to do adding to solve. You got multiplication, you got to do division to solve. So that means with division, you should probably do multiplication to solve. And that's absolutely right. I'm glad you were thinking that, okay? So 8 divided by 3, h divided by 3 equals 8. Therefore, to solve for that h, you must do what's being divided, which is 3, but you're going to do the opposite of dividing, which is multiplying. It's going to look kind of like this. Okay, but now, just like I subtracted to both sides, just like I added to both sides, just like I divided to both sides, I have to multiply to both sides. Once again, like before, that's going to cancel out just like it did with every single one. Nothing special with this one. And then what we have is h, okay, all by itself on this side, because those canceled out. And then 8 times 3 is going to be 24. Now this one had no funny business. There was no positives or negatives, no weird stuff going on. It was all just straight positives with example 4. So that's it for solving one-step equations. Nothing special with these ones. There shouldn't be anything different. So one-step equations just require one step. You're either going to like add or subtract or multiply, divide. And they should all look like this. So if you read it out loud to your head, like x plus 3 equals -8. Okay, it was something plus 3. So to solve for it, you got to like unravel it. And to unravel it, you have to do the opposite. Okay, so hopefully that helps you get going on this week with their assignments on solving one-step equations. All right, have a good night.